The most controversial angle of ufology, this is what we're looking at, deaths in the subject. Of course, we have to be very careful how we address such matters. Just because someone in the domain of ufology dies does not mean there has to be a mystery behind it. Brent Swanser, Mysterious Universe, writes in my new book, Diary of Secrets, it's a look at the way and the life, mysterious death of Marilyn Monroe. She was really, she ended her life for what she knew about UFOs and aliens. What happened to her? She died young, as we know. What's the primary question I ask in the book? It should be noted, though, that there have been a number of suspicious deaths in the UFO field. Of course, we have to be very careful how we address such matters. Just because someone in the domain of ufology dies does not mean there has to be a mystery behind it. In fact, my view is that while there have been some strange deaths tied to UFO subject, they are in the minority. For example, there's the matter of the death of the late Dr. John E. Mack, who died after being hit by a car in a busy London street in 2004. I've seen people in ufology claim that Mack was murdered on that London road. Total nonsense. It was the night of September 27, 2004 that Mack was lost his life. It's important to note that Mack was in England at the time. Mack was walking along London's tottering lane when tragedy struck. He stepped out onto a crosswalk and was hit and killed by a drunk driver. His name was Raymond Tchaikovsky, at the time 52 years of age. The emergency services were quick on the scene, but it was too late. In an article at UFO Updates, we have the following. Mr. Tchaikovsky was sentenced to 15 months imprisonment and was disqualified from driving for 3 years. The judge also ordered that before Mr. Tchaikovsky was allowed to return to driving, he must take an extended driving test. Because of time already spent in custody, Mr. Tchaikovsky will serve 6 months of the 15-month sentence. There's another issue that may have relevance, one which I can relate to. It was September, it was nighttime, it was London, it was busy, and John Mack was an American in England. I'm an Englishman who lives in America. When I moved to the United States 15 years ago, two of the very first things I had to do were learn to drive on the opposite side of the road and also to take a U.S. driving test. For those who may not know, whereas in the States we drive on the right, in the UK we drive on the left. So what we have with the death of John Mack is a series of things that culminated in disaster. There was a darkness, a busy London road, traffic traveling in the direction that's not typical for the victim, and the main thing, a drunk driver. Put all of those issues together and we have a terrible tragedy. What we don't have is a conspiracy to have Mack killed. And moving on, when Mac Tonnies, the author of several books, included After the Martian Apocalypse and The Crypto-Terrestrials, died in 2009 at the young age of just 34, I heard stupid statements that Mac had been murdered. He had a heart condition, though. Period. With that all said, let's look at a couple of fatal cases that I do think are worthy of investigation, and that just might have had links to the UFO topic. May 22nd, 1949 was the date on which the first U.S. Secretary of Defense, James Forrestal, died, specifically at 1:50 a.m. As will quickly become apparent, the circumstances surrounding Forrestal's final hours were swamped in controversy. All that we know with absolute certainty is that in the early hours of the 22nd, Forrestal's body was found on a third-floor canopy of the Bethesda Naval Hospital, Maryland. Did he take a fatal step out of the window of the 13th floor of the hospital? His mind in turmoil and suicide in his mind. Was it an accident or was Forrestal offed? Let's have a look at this undeniably strange and disturbing affair. We'll begin with a bit of important background on the man himself. For years, there's been rumors that Forrestal was taken out of circulation as a result of what he knew about UFOs. Certainly, the circumstances surrounding Forrestal's death are suspicious at the least. Let's remember this is 1949, about 2 years, less than 2 years after the Roswell, New Mexico UFO crash and aliens story. Now, there's Dorothy Kilgallen, a well-known journalist who had an interest in UFOs and who wrote about them on several occasions, who died under controversial circumstances in 1965 while she was investigating the JFK assassination of November 22nd, 1963. Born in Chicago, July 1913, Kilgallen was someone who, without the benefit of a college degree, soared up the ranks in the field of journalism. She became one of the most popular, and at times hated and even feared, figures in the media. Kilgallen was also someone who moved effortlessly in the worlds of high society, Hollywood, politics, government secrecy, and deep and dark conspiracies. She was buddies with Marilyn Monroe, and she hung out with Ernest Hemingway, and Kilgallen was also someone who was the subject of extensive surveillance by several agencies of the U.S. intelligence community. Indeed, the FBI surveillance file on Kilgallen runs to hundreds of pages. As Kilgallen's research into the intricacies of the whole JFK affair increased, she became somewhat worried and then frightened. She was concerned that her life was in danger. All of which leads up to the matter of her puzzling, controversy-filled death at the discovery of her dead in bed on November 8, 1965. Now to another case. In the late 1970s, UFO researcher Richard Reynolds was contacted by a man named Bosko Nedeljkovic. The latter suggested that the space brother type encounter of one Arthur Bryant in the wilds of Devon, England in April 1965 had very little to do with aliens and much more to do with secret experimentation of a very down-to-earth nature. Nedeljkovic, who worked for the U.S. Department of State's Agency for International Development and who also had ties to the CIA, claimed that Bryant was the victim of a form of sophisticated mind control somewhat akin to the kind of work undertaken by the CIA's MKUltra program. Nedeljkovic told Reynolds of a number of bogus UFO episodes in both the US and the UK, in which individuals were led to believe that they had UFO encounters when in fact they experienced something very different. Nedeljkovic alluded to how these events involved visual displays, radar displacement, and artifact droppings. One of those events, said Nedeljkovic, was the Bryant case. Nedeljkovic also revealed how the operation proceeded, and which involved experimental drugs used to induce specific hallucinatory material, as well as microwave transmissions. On this latter point, Reynolds was told by Nedeljkovic that the injudicious use of microwave technology led to a disastrous outcome for Bryant. As history has shown, Bryant died from the effects of a fast-developing brain tumor, and in this case, we are not talking about murder. We're talking, however, about accidental death of just about the worst type possible. So yes, I do believe that there have been fatal events in relation to UFOs, but we need to be very careful not to go over the top. Just because someone in ufology dies, we should not automatically think murder. We should use our common sense and address everything very carefully. This is by Brent Swanser, Mysterious Universe on Collective Spark. Please leave your comments. Thank you for your support. Kindly support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.